In the sterile, cold corridors of the maternity ward, I lay trembling not just from the physical pain tearing through my body, but from a fear so profound it felt like an abyss opening beneath me. Mikhailo was gone. The man who had once promised to stand by my side had vanished into the arms of another woman, leaving me alone in this cruel world with a decision no mother should ever have to make. As the doctors hovered over me, their voices distant and muffled as though they were speaking underwater, I realized that death might be closer than I thought. The complications after childbirth left me weak, bleeding internally, and fighting for every breath. It wasn't supposed to end this way, but there he was, my tiny miracle, wailing softly in the incubator next to me, his fragile life tethered to mine. Yet how could I give him anything when I couldn't even save myself? That's when she came, the nurse with the clipboard, her tone clinical yet tinged with pity. "There's someone here," she whispered. "Someone willing to take your burden. A buyer. A stranger offering salvation wrapped in betrayal." And so, driven by desperation and terror, I signed away my soul and my son. Years passed, or maybe it only felt that way because guilt stretches time into eternity. Every night I replayed the moment I let him go, haunted by questions. Did he grow up happy? Did they love him the way I would have? Then came the day I least expected, a chance encounter with Mikhailo at a cafe. His eyes still held the same warmth, but now they carried shadows of regret too. We sat across from each other, our words faltering between apologies and accusations, neither daring to fully confront the past. Just as we began to lower our defenses, the phone rang, a shrill, jarring sound slicing through the fragile connection we'd started rebuilding. On the other end, chaos erupted. Igor, the boy I didn't know was my own, had been in a horrific motorcycle accident. My heart stopped. Not again. Not this time. This wasn't some random teenager. This was him. The son I sold. The son Mikhailo unknowingly raised. Fate, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor, forcing us to face what we'd buried under layers of lies and silence. As we raced toward the hospital, the car filled with unspoken truths and suffocating tension, Mikhailo gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, while I clutched the edge of my seat, praying harder than I ever had before. The roads blurred together, mirroring the storm raging inside me. What if he didn't survive? What if I lost him all over again? Each second stretched longer than the last, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us like a leaden sky. When we finally arrived, the fluorescent lights of the emergency room seared my vision, and the antiseptic smell choked my lungs. They told us he needed rare blood. Without hesitation, I volunteered, feeling the sharp sting of the needle pierce my skin. For the first time in years, I felt purpose. If giving part of myself could keep him alive, then I would bleed dry. But as the doctor explained the severity of his condition, reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. He wasn't out of danger yet. Not by a long shot. And standing beside me, Mikhailo looked as broken as I felt. Together we waited, two strangers bound by secrets and despair, clinging to hope as fragile as glass. The storm that had been brewing in our lives reached its peak when Olga returned from Paris, her presence cutting through the fragile peace we'd managed to cobble together. She wasn't just back. She was on a mission, a calculated crusade to reclaim what she believed was hers. Mikhailo and Igor. Her arrival felt like an earthquake, shaking the foundations of everything I thought I knew about my tangled existence. At first glance, it seemed innocent enough, Olga's polished demeanor, her expensive perfume lingering in the air, but beneath the surface lay venomous intentions. She wanted to erase me, Vira, from their lives entirely. And why wouldn't she? To her, I was nothing more than a ghost from the past, a shadow threatening to disrupt the life she'd built with Mikhailo. Meanwhile, Vadim stumbled upon a truth so devastating it shattered whatever remained of his dignity. He confronted me one evening, his voice trembling with rage and disbelief. "You had a child with him?" He spat, the accusation slicing through the silence like a blade. I couldn't deny it not anymore. The weight of my secrets crashed down around us, burying any hope of salvaging what little trust we once shared. Vadim's face contorted with pain, betrayal etched into every line of his expression. How could I explain something even I didn't fully understand? That the boy who now lay fighting for his life in a hospital bed was not only my son, but also the son of the man I'd loved before Mikhailo. Fate had woven a cruel tapestry, binding us all together in ways none of us could escape. Speaking of Igor, the very thought of him sent waves of terror coursing through me. His accident had escalated into a battle against time itself, as doctors scrambled to find a match for his rare blood type. Each hour dragged by like days, filled with unbearable tension. Mikhailo and I sat side by side in the waiting room, two strangers united by desperation. Neither of us spoke, yet the unspoken truths hung heavy between us. Would Igor survive this ordeal? Could we endure another loss? The guilt gnawed at me relentlessly. I had abandoned him once, and now fate taunted me with the possibility of losing him forever. As the hours ticked away, Olga appeared in the hospital hallway, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. She looked at Mikhailo with a mixture of possessiveness and sorrow, as if daring him to choose someone else over her again. But Mikhailo's gaze remained fixed on the closed doors behind which our son fought for his life. For the first time, I saw vulnerability in Olga's eyes, a flicker of fear that perhaps she wasn't as untouchable as she believed. Yet she refused to back down, clinging to the illusion of control even as the world crumbled around her. Vadim, meanwhile, retreated into himself, consumed by anger and humiliation. He called me late one night, his voice raw with emotion. "How could you do this to me?" he demanded, each word laced with bitterness. "I gave you everything, and you betrayed me." There was no defense I could offer, no apology sufficient to mend the chasm between us. All I could do was listen, the sound of his sobs echoing in my ears long after he hung up. And then the call came, the doctor informing us they had found a compatible donor. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. The road ahead was still fraught with uncertainty, and the scars left by our choices would never fully heal. As I watched Mikhailo sign the consent forms, his hand steady despite the turmoil within, I realized how deeply entwined our fates were. We were prisoners of our past, bound by love, loss, and the relentless pursuit of redemption. The universe has a cruel way of timing its revelations, and for me, Vira, it chose the cruelest moment imaginable. Just as I began piecing together fragments of Igor's face, his eyes that mirrored mine, his smile that carried echoes of my youth, a phone call shattered everything. Mikhailo's voice trembled on the other end, each word hitting me like a sledgehammer. "Igor's been in an accident." The world around me seemed to collapse in slow motion. My knees buckled, but somehow I managed to stay upright, clutching the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. How could this happen now? Now, when I had finally realized he was my son, the child I gave away in desperation, the boy whose existence haunted every corner of my soul. By the time we reached the hospital, panic had consumed us all. Mikhailo's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they turned white, while I sat beside him, frozen with dread. Every second felt like an eternity, every red light mocking our helplessness. When we arrived, the sterile glow of the emergency room greeted us, cold and unforgiving. The doctors delivered their verdict without emotion. Igor needed blood-rare blood, and there were no compatible donors available. His condition was critical. Every passing minute pushed him closer to the brink of death. I couldn't breathe. Was this punishment for what I'd done? For abandoning him years ago? A nurse approached me hesitantly, asking if anyone in the family might be a match. Family. The word struck me like lightning. Could it be possible? Summoning every ounce of courage, I offered myself as a donor, silently praying that biology would grant me one last chance to save him. As the tests began, I watched Mikhailo pace back and forth, his face etched with anguish. He didn't know yet. He didn't understand the depth of the connection between Igor and me. But how could I tell him now, in this chaos, with his son's life hanging by a thread? Hours passed, agonizingly slow. Each beep of the heart monitor felt like a countdown to doom. Finally, the doctor returned, his expression unreadable. "She's a match," he said, gesturing toward me. Relief flooded through me, but was short-lived. They warned us Igor wasn't out of danger yet. The transfusion began, and I held my breath, willing my strength into his fragile body. Mikhailo stood nearby, his gaze flickering between Igor and me, suspicion brewing beneath the surface. Only then did I realize the truth would soon come to light. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. The weight of the truth pressed down on me like a mountain, threatening to crush everything I had rebuilt over the years. Vira, mother, sinner, survivor, stood at the precipice of revelation, torn between silence and confession. Each night, as I stared at the ceiling, Igor's face swam before my eyes, his pain now intertwined with mine. How could I stay silent when every beat of his heart carried echoes of my betrayal? Yet how could I speak without destroying the fragile lives we'd all cobbled together? Mikhailo would never forgive me if he learned the depth of my deception. And Olga, she was already circling like a hawk, ready to pounce on any weakness. Mikhailo, too, found himself caught in an impossible tug-of-war. His wife, Olga, clung to him with desperation that bordered on obsession, her love laced with possessiveness. She knew I was certain of it. Somehow she had pieced together the fragments of our shattered past. Her fury simmered beneath her polished exterior, manifesting in calculated attempts to keep me away from Igor. "You don't belong here," she hissed one evening, cornering me outside the hospital cafeteria. "He has parents who love him. You're nothing but a ghost trying to haunt what isn't yours." Her words stung because they were true, or at least they felt true. But how could I walk away now, after finally finding him? Every step I took toward Igor felt like walking through quicksand. The harder I tried to reach him, the more resistance I encountered. Olga orchestrated elaborate schemes to block my visit, spreading lies about me to the hospital staff, even going so far as to bribe nurses to monitor my movements. It was humiliating, exhausting, but worst of all, it worked. Mikhailo began questioning my intentions, his trust wavering under Olga's relentless manipulation. "Why are you really here?" he asked one day, his voice heavy with suspicion. "What do you want from us?" "US." The word sliced through me like a knife. There was no us anymore. There hadn't been for years. But Olga had rebuilt their fortress, brick by brick, leaving no room for intruders. And yet, despite her efforts, fate refused to let me go. One afternoon, while hiding in the stairwell to avoid another confrontation with Olga, I overheard Mikhailo arguing with her. "She saved his life," he shouted, his voice trembling with anger. "If it weren't for her, Igor might not be alive right now." Olga's response was cold, cutting. "Do you think that gives her some kind of claim over him? Over you?" Silence followed, thick and suffocating. In that moment, I realized the battle wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us, entangled in a web of choices none of us could undo. Time seemed to stretch into an eternity as I sat in the hospital waiting room, clutching my trembling hands together. Vira, a mother who had lost her son once, was now facing the possibility of losing him forever. Igor's life hung by a thread, and the doctors warned us that every second counted. My blood wasn't compatible, but Vira's was a cruel irony given the circumstances. Yet, even as she offered herself as a donor, fate tested her resolve. The transfusion process required meticulous preparation, and each delay felt like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. "We're running out of time," the doctor muttered under his breath, his words slicing through what little hope remained. For a moment, it felt as though the universe itself conspired against us, determined to sever the fragile bond Vera had only just rediscovered with her son. It was during this chaos that the truth about Igor's origins came crashing down on me like an avalanche. As I signed the emergency consent forms, still reeling from the fear of losing him, a nurse handed me a file of our adoption records. At first glance, the details seemed innocuous. A newborn boy delivered in secrecy, placed into our care without question. But then I saw the name of the birth mother, Vira Vasilevna. My mind reeled, memories flooding back in fragments. The desperation in her eyes years ago. The way she vanished from my life after selling our child. Selling him. The realization hit me like a freight train. All this time, the woman I'd loved, the woman I still harbored feelings for, was Igor's biological mother. And I had unknowingly raised her son, loved him as my own, while she carried the weight of her sacrifice in silence. The irony was suffocating. Here we were, fighting to save the life of a boy whose existence tied us together in ways neither of us could have imagined. Yet, instead of feeling anger or betrayal, I felt only grief for Vera, for myself, and for the years we'd wasted apart. The timing couldn't have been more brutal. Just when I thought I understood the depth of her pain, another layer of suffering revealed itself. "If we don't act quickly, he won't make it," the doctor said bluntly, snapping me back to reality. Vera stood beside me, pale and resolute, her eyes fixed on the closed doors behind which Igor fought for his life. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence spoke volumes. In that moment, I realized how much she had sacrificed, not just once, but repeatedly, and how little I truly knew about the woman I claimed to love. The hospital room felt like a battlefield, every beep of the heart monitor echoing like a war drum, signaling Igor's fragile hold on life. His condition had worsened overnight. His body was rejecting the initial transfusion, and time was slipping through our fingers like sand in an hourglass. The doctors rushed around, their voices sharp with urgency. "We need another donor immediately," one of them barked, glancing at me as if weighing whether I could endure another round. My chest tightened. How much more could I give before I collapsed myself? Yet there was no choice. This was my son, the child I had abandoned but now desperately needed to save. Inside me, a storm raged fiercer than any external chaos. Every step towards saving Igor forced me to confront the ghosts of my past, the shame of selling him, the years spent pretending he didn't exist, the lies that had piled up like bricks in a wall separating me from happiness. Each drop of blood I offered felt like penance for sins too heavy to bear. But what terrified me most wasn't the physical toll. It was facing Mikhailo afterward. What would he say when he realized I had kept this secret buried for so long? Would he hate me? Worse yet, would he take Igor away forever? As fate would have it, the confrontation came sooner than expected. Olga stormed into the waiting room, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor, her eyes blazing with fury. "How dare you interfere?" She spat, pointing an accusatory finger at me. "You think you can waltz back into his life after all these years and claim him as yours?" Mikhailo stood frozen between us, torn between loyalty to his wife and the undeniable truth staring him in the face. "She saved his life," he finally said, his voice trembling. "Without her, he wouldn't be here right now." Olga recoiled, her composure cracking under the weight of his words. "And what about me?" she demanded, tears streaming down her face. "What about everything I've done for him?" The air crackled with tension, each word cutting deeper than the last. For a moment, it seemed as though the fragile alliances we'd built over the years were crumbling entirely. Then Vadim appeared, his expression unreadable. "So this is where we stand," he said quietly, looking at me with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "After everything, you still choose them over me?" His voice broke on the last word, and I saw not just anger but profound hurt in his eyes. In that moment, surrounded by the people whose lives I had irrevocably altered, I understood the magnitude of my choices. Saving Yegor meant exposing wounds none of us were prepared to heal. It meant dismantling the lives we had constructed and starting anew, or perhaps never recovering at all. As I signed the consent forms for the second transfusion, I whispered a silent prayer. "Please let him live. Let us survive this."